So good afternoon. Welcome to the session Firewatch Training. I was saying, for those of us who don't know us, we are the Shadrach Safety Institute, and we are what you call a registered tertiary level education provider operating here in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. We do, the fleet of NEBOSH courses from the beginner's level to the master's degree. We don't have anybody any masters right now, but we do have about 23 students on the NEBOSH diploma, a bit more, some of them being a separate batch anyway. And we offer all of these courses. I was saying though, because of my time, we sometimes, so it's not every Thursday. This is actually the first Thursday for the year, right? And we're doing Firewatch. And then it probably won't come back again, till maybe a next quarter or so. And then that is still based on my time. If I book something else on a Tuesday night, that has my attention for about 4 or 5 months anyway. Right. So without any further ado, let's get into this Firewatch training. Please feel free. It's just about 10, 11 of you all. Feel free to interrupt me. Feel free because it's a bit of a long sitting, right? It's half 6 to 8, and feel free to interrupt me. Of course, I know this is a sacrifice for everybody. This time, especially for the folks who prepared dinner and stuff, this is the time for that. So you could go ahead and do that. Hopefully, you are listening in at the same time. If you could please give us your undivided attention as well, or when you could have something on the fire, or you could be, taken to the dishes. And at some point in time, then you may have like a 10 minutes in between to sort of pay attention to it, right? Once you could do that, please pay attention. Please take part. I do know everybody name here, so I'll probably should call you all and see if you all are following with it, right? So we have Firewatch training, going straight into this. Oh, by the way, I was saying certificates we'll try to get them ready for Monday, right? At the moment, it's kind of one person at the office right now. We're going to try to change that. We do have some part-time lecturers and whatever, but at the moment it's just me at the office. And even if I prepare the certs tomorrow, I know they wouldn't be printed by the printry until Monday, right? They may be printed by Saturday, but then I don't have time to go for them on Saturday. Saturday I have classes till 4:30 in the evening. By that time the printry is closed, right? So you most likely be able to pick up your certs on Monday for those of us who want it. I will ask you all if you all could. I mean, you all have my number. At least you should. If you don't have it, you could write it down, or you could take it, you could add it 489-2426. So you could probably message me before you come. I would try to go for it, like I said, Monday, and I'll have it with me, God's willing, about 10, half 10, 11, if anybody want to pass by for it, right? All right, let's make a start. And so the certificates are valid for 2 years. And like I said, those who don't know us, we are registered with the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, these courses come from a recognized tertiary level institute anyway. All right, so fire alarm and firefighting equipment. Let me just kind of bring this up. In fact, no, I'll kind of keep it on that view because I want to see how far we are going, right? So we refer to these as a fire warden or a fire watch sort of best friends, right? So what these things are there to help, indicate the presence of a fire, right? So the function of a fire detection system to detect one or more changes in the environment that indicates the development of a fire. They will operate when the invisible products of combustion are being released, when smoke is being released. So it's not just smoke, right? The invisible products of fire could be carbon dioxide and increase in that, carbon monoxide, right? And you do have different types of detectors. You'll see it on the next slide. We have, of course, some of you all know the smoke detectors, but then there are some of them that are heat detectors, right? So for a fire warden, I mean, or a fire watch, like you may not go into action then, right? Until one of these devices go off, unless you're very observant. But what about the heat? What about, like maybe if there's a heat detector, now Trinidad is sort of warm anyway. So you may not be able to pick up that change in temperature, but the detectors would, right? So a detector would be designed to detect a fire at one of four stages of a fire. We have the products of combustion, including carbon monoxide, as I mentioned, smoke, flame, and heat. And you have different types of detectors. We have ionizing detectors, optical detectors, and heat detectors. The first two, now please take note because remember, for those of us who are doing this for work, right? It's here and then it's in the companies. And those of us who know we have a very good reputation out there, um, many companies are able to tell a student from here. Many companies are able to select you all instead of another company, like somebody who did firewood somewhere else, right? And what makes them do that is because you all have the knowledge now, right? And like I've known some firewatch who started as firewatch, and when they spoke, the company asked them where they did the course. Um, I've known a firewatch who took part in risk assessments at their company, and later on, the company offered them full-fledged positions. Some of these people are managers today, but they came back and they did the NEBOSH now. Some of you all know, right? I can call those companies for you all. I don't know if I want to, because some of those things may be kind of sensitive information to those persons anyway, right? I'll call one or two as the night go along anyway, right? So the first type of detectors, the ionizing and the optical, they are called smoke detectors, right? And the other one is a heat detector. And you actually have different types of heat detectors as well. I probably will get into that a bit more if you want. I could tell you one of the names. No, like one of the most common names. So if you go to buy these things, then if you go to get them at a safety store, by the way, you can get them in a hardware. Most hardwares sell smoke detectors and heat detectors. Price Smart, you can pick up two smoke detectors for about the price of $100, right? Companies do, I suppose, when I say I mean big companies, small companies may still go back to Price Smart or to the local hardware, but big companies may source them through safety stores, right? CSP, regional fire and safety, safety plus. You could probably get them for the same price, right? Regional fire and safety is on Coffee Street, right? And so you can get them. I mean, I don't think the prices are different. Price Mart may have deals from time to time, but like what you buy then via the counter is basically what is called an ionizing smoke detector. So if you want to take that down, most of the common smoke detectors you see are ionizing smoke detectors. If you are looking for a heat detector, you may have to ask for it by name. And one of the most common name is the rate of rise smoke detector. So as a fire warden, as a fire watch, when you get back there tomorrow, or wherever you get out in a company, and you see a smoke detector, by asking a sensible question, by asking the safety, by asking the managers, is that an ionizing smoke detector? They will know something different. Something is different with you, right? Those are the things that make people stand out. Those are the things that get people opportunities. Those are the things that kind of put you in front of other persons then, right? So let's look at the next slide. So, well, I mean, this is a basic look at it. There are three main ways an alarm may be generated. You have like the wired system, which is like a manual break glass system. Of course, you have the smoke detector, and then you have the heat detector, right? There is what is called a call point on those devices. Like as a fire warden, fire watch, you may not me, I think you should know how to test these things, right? So one of the ways to test them is that there is, in fact, let me talk about this. Please take some extra notes if you want to. So with the ionizing smoke detector and with the optical smoke detector, you would see that pulse here. There's like a LED light. If you stare at it, so this is one of the ways to check it. If you look at it, right, and you count about 30 seconds, you should see it pulsing, you should see it blinking, right? Now, what that indicates, it indicates that the battery mechanism in it, or the power mechanism in it, is actually working, right? So there are some of them, if you're in an old, I'm just saying, if you're in an old building, warehouse, shutdown is going on, and you are the fire watch, you look up and you see the smoke detectors, you're looking up, don't try to blink. You can do it a couple of times. And if you think you blink fine, right? You can do it a couple of times. And if you're looking at this thing and it's not going off, then the battery may need to change in it, right? The ionizing smoke detector have like a 9-volt battery in it, right? So sometimes even things like that then can make you stand out. If you're looking at it, you call your friend, you call an ex-fire watch, you call an ex-fire warden, you look at it, you're not seeing anything. Well, you probably need to change the battery, right? And you probably need to recommend, well, can we take it down? Can we take it down and just check to see if the battery is okay in it, right? So again, all of those things could actually help you. You could be there, you could be in an office and something is on fire. The carbon monoxide in its purest form is actually invisible. Yeah, carbon monoxide is actually invisible. What you see from the exhaust of a car or a truck is really the combustion products, from the oil or from the diesel or from the gas. The carbon monoxide itself, elements of that is actually invisible, right? So these detectors, these things could actually help you out a bit, including if it's minute amount of smoke that maybe you did not see, these things could help you out a bit, to sort of raise an alarm, right? Another thing in this is that there is a point of weakness in it. There's like a groove in it, right? There's like a groove in the smoke detectors for you to press. Now, I would recommend that you don't press it if you could press it, because most of these things are, I know, hang from the ceiling. But you may want to press it, but you need to press it when, I guess, maybe you could confirm with the safeties and the company or those of us from the companies. Maybe you could press it after working hours because if it works, it will give off a very loud beep, right? But by pressing it, that's another way to make sure that the sounding mechanism in there is still working because the battery could be good, but the sounding mechanism could be bad, right? So it's a good idea. Sometimes once for the quarter, the safeties will do it. And again, if you are getting into a new plant or a new building, or maybe you know that smoke detector has been there for the year, don't press it during working hours, of course. Please ask proper permission, those of us in the companies, right? You could probably mention to them. I know when some companies do it on a Saturday, right? Of course, if you're working shutdown and thing, you may have to kind of inform the company or inform. I mean, if it's just one unit, if it's just a series of units, though, you may have to inform the persons in that warehouse that when they hear it go off, it's just a test the safety department is doing. It's just a test, that they are doing anyway. So it doesn't give the sense then that there's some kind of disaster. It can make everyone know that during the hours of 4:30 to 5 will be sort of just confirming that these things still work if you haven't tested them for 5 years, 10 years, etc. Right? So please take a note of that. And some of the other good friends that we have as Firewatch that would actually save your life, save a building, maybe save somebody's life is extinguishers, right? I'm not too sure if you all have ever had to use them. They're not that difficult to use. If you have never used them, I would say that they're very much like an insecticide can. If you have, again, it depends on the office and depends on the area that you are in. There are some of you may end up with very big ones that you have to sort of wheel on. The office extinguisher, the office type, is very small. You may have a couple of those, but the way we use them is the same. You have to, well, I'll come to that in a bit, right? You'd have to pull the pin, right? There's a pin, there's a locking mechanism in it. I have a video to show. I'll show it, more or less in a bit. Pull the pin, aim the hose to the base of the fire, squeeze the nozzle, and you don't really, if you have never used it, folks, you don't really have to squeeze excessively. It's just like using an insecticide can. If you press the insecticide can a bit is going to come out. If you press it down a lot is going to come out, right? Some people are very surprised if you've never used it, how effective it is, right? If there is a fire that is not too well developed because extinguishers are meant for a fire in the incipient stages, right? So I want to say maybe the incipient stages could be about let me see, maybe about 1 meter, 3 feet, right? They refer to that as deflagration, which is the height of the flame. So the flame cannot be like 6 feet high, right? 7 feet is like the height of the door to the back of me here, right? So, but I have used an extinguisher on a fire that high already. The only thing though, I mean, I would have used what I had, which was a water extinguisher. Um, Perhaps what would have been best is a powder extinguishers. Powder extinguishers are very effective. They're very messy though, right? So that 7 feet high is a big fire. Really and truly remember, an extinguisher is meant for the use of a fire or on fire in the incipient stages. So 2 to 3 feet, not that high. And you would be amazed squeeze, in one squeeze, that's the end of the fire, right? Some people are a little bit shocked if you have never used it in one squeeze, if you did it the right way, right? But you aim at the base of the fire, right? That's the end of the fire in one squeeze, right? So normally if you use it, if you have a chance to use it, you'll kind of realize, okay, I didn't really have to panic that much. I didn't really have to squeeze the nozzle that hard. You could have control the amount that was given off. Then you didn't have to. Some people panic, squeeze the whole thing, right? And big puff of powder is released, but you could control it, right? Just I guess like a fireman, but of course there's a water extinguisher, same thing. You could control like the pressure of the water and by how much you squeeze that nozzle, right? So kind of take that into consideration. Let's kind of run through the types of extinguisher here. So we have water, foam, dry powder, vaporizing liquids, carbon dioxide. Probably the most common one that you would use is a dry powder because that tends to be multi-purpose. Water depends on the process that we are dealing with. If it's an office, still most office extinguishers are sort of powder, right? Most are powder. Most companies don't like the water too much. The reason is that they say like if it's equipment and if it's like, electronic items, most of the times they say, well, like the water may do just as bad damage. If you apply water to units, if you apply water to a process, water to a piece of equipment, you're gonna damage the equipment, right? So most companies kind of don't like the water extinguishers. The powder do leave a mess and it's a very, very fine powder. The powder too, but the powder is kind of multi-purpose. And as I was saying, the powder, most offices would have the powder extinguisher. Carbon dioxide is the best, but carbon dioxide is not meant for all offices. Most people don't recommend a carbon dioxide for an office. Carbon dioxide is kind of the best for if you have sensitive equipment, data equipment, computer, machinery and stuff like, process equipment then, right? So what the carbon dioxide does, the carbon dioxide does not wet the equipment, nor does it mess it up. Carbon dioxide is a gas. It's kind of cold. It's actually very cold. It's about minus two something, about 212 degrees Celsius. It's very cold. So it's like a fog. You kind of spray a fog on the equipment, and that's good. It's gonna cool down the fire a bit, right? Displace the oxygen and it doesn't leave a mess. So CO2 is kind of the preferred for sensitive equipment. However, CO2 has a disadvantage in that it would actually deplete oxygen. And if you're in a tank or a vessel, CO2 may just suffocate you more than because it's the opposite to carbon dioxide, right? So suitability of different types of extinguishers. CO2 suitable for electrical equipment, as I mentioned. Let me admit somebody here. Suitable for flammable liquids, chemical labs, anything that's sensitive, right? However, it's unsuitable where you have less oxygen, like a confined space. You don't want to use a CO2 in a vessel that already have less oxygen. Unless if the person have their own supply of oxygen, right? Maybe if they have a self-contained tank on their back, self-contained in a breathing apparatus, fine. CO2 is unsuitable for certain metals that create their own sort of heat source, like sodium, right? Potassium, magnesium. These are called metals on the periodic table. Sodium tends to react with the air. CO2 may be useful in it, but really and truly, once sodium is in contact with the air, it tends to catch a fire, right? So yeah, they kind of store sodium under oil. It's not best to even use any sort of thing on it, right? So sodium is always kept under oil, right? I'm not I suppose it could work on some of these, but you have to be careful because one of the things with a CO2 extinguisher is that because the CO2 is not wetting the material surface, I don't know if you know that. Um, if you were to apply the CO2 extinguisher, it may look as if the fire goes out. So it will go out. By the time you squeeze one, it will go out, right? By the time you press another one, it would actually go out. But the thing is, CO2 is a gas, is a mist. So as soon as that gas dissipates, the fire could actually reignite, right? So that's one of the disadvantages of a CO2. They say if you're using a CO2 extinguisher, never turn your back on the fire, right? Never sort of, like you have to kind of apply it well enough and maybe you want to apply something else, get rid of the fuel source or whatever have you, because the CO2 is not really wetting. We use that to make wetting the surface. It's just cooling the fire at that point in time, right? So it's not a good idea to kind of say, okay, everything is okay. And then as soon as you walk away, that fire, especially with reactive metals, could actually reignite once exposed to the air, right? So water extinguishers normally have a red body and a red label. It depends on where you buy them from. If you purchase them from like the US, they normally come with a silver canister. So if you see a silver extinguisher, that's water, right? But then some places you go, you'll actually see the whole thing looking red, right? I would recommend because Trinidad purchase, when we purchase things I'm all about, right? So China, Europe, America, Canada, right? Japan and whatever. So I would recommend you go and you read the label on it and not just take this to be the golden guide because it will normally say what it's for. Most office extinguishers may look just like this, but if you read it, it says class A, B, and C, and I'll explain that to you in a bit, right? So water extinguishers, either red or silver, but please read it. It is normally written on it. Um, Water extinguishers are not best for fires involving oil. As some of you already know, water would actually spread an oil fire. There have been instances here in Trinidad where people use the wrong extinguishers on the fire, and what that did, it spread the fire more, right? So not safe to use on fires involving electricity. You know that water could actually conduct as well if you have some sort of electrolytes in it. But water extinguishers extinguish by cooling, right? So they'll cool down the fire, and then that is how the fire is brought under control. Foam extinguishers are red body cream label, suitable for Class A and Class B fires. I'll explain that to you in a bit. Not suitable for fires involving electricity, extinguishes by cooling and sealing the surface of a burning liquid. So if you want to get tell you the classes of fires now, it's actually on the other slide, but it's not hard. So let me just tell you it one time, right? So the classes of fires, we have Class A, B, C, D, and F, right? Electrical fires are said to be electrical fires. This is F down here, right? So it's an easy way to remember it. Easy way to remember it. A class A fire is a fire involving solids, right? So you can write it down. You can just write it down from here. A class A fire is a fire involving solids. So like wood, paper, cardboard, leaves, tree branches, you know, but not just any solids. They say combustible solids. So maybe we should clear that up. Not 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 harmful solids then, not tires and stuff. We're not talking about tire and like the spare tire of a car and plastics. No, we're not talking about that, right? So class A is actually combustible solids, like naturally occurring organic solids then. Hence I said trees, tree leaves, branches, paper, cardboard, right? Office stuff then, stuff that you may find at the office, right? Or around, maybe even a workshop you have, discarded packaging, right? You may have pieces of board, you may have pieces of lumber, right? That's a class A fire, fire involving solids. Class B fires. So when I do this now, I'm not doing it in the next slide. I'm doing it one time here, right? Class B fires is fires involving liquids like kerosene. So that kind of liquid, flammable liquids, right? Flammable liquids. You can think of kerosene, diesel, petrol, or
gasoline,
gasoline. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody?
oil.
Well, actually, oil is actually F, right? Oil
Oh,
is, yeah. So flammable liquids, just think about the most common ones, right? Kerosene, which we call petrol, diesel.
or like alcohol and
Yeah,
ethanol and stuff like that.
alcohol may fall in that. Yeah, alcohol may fall within class B fires as well, right? So class C fires is fires involving gases, right? So you can think of whichever one, methane, propane, home, in the kitchen, butane, right? Based on what company in hydrogen sulfide, right? So you can think of it as solids, liquid, gases, A, B, C. Very simple, solid, liquid, gases, right? Um, this actually looking like a stick figure here. Let me just try to fix that. Um, Class D, right, is fires involving metals. But I was studying a class up to last night, in fact, something we're doing it had this in it, right? Actually, we're doing oil and gas last night, right? And we're doing the same thing. So class D fires involving metals, but the metals they're talking about is not steel now. It's like you know how they say um gold is a precious metal, silver is a precious metal, platinum is a precious metal. So the metals they're talking about is like metals from the earth then, right? And that may include aluminum. Remember, you could actually mine that, you could actually mine, right? Mine, right? For aluminum, magnesium, those kind of things. There's metals in the earth. And you wonder, like, where would I ever see a fire involving metals in the earth? Remember, they'd extract it from the ore, right? So, like, magnesium is used a lot in fireworks, right? Magnesium is used in some aspects of gunpowder. Explosions, then, which we don't get too much in the Caribbean here, but magnesium, aluminum, even the sodium we mentioned before, those kind of metals is like what they have in mind here, right? So class D fires involving metals, you could think of it maybe for a simple explanation, things like fireworks and whatever have you. And class F, as we mentioned, is fires involving cooking oil, whichever cooking oil you use, right? Even if it's coconut oil, soya bean oil, it still is coconut oil, right? So anywhere you go, like if you go to a restaurant, which we all do, barbecue hut, wherever have you, right? And you see some sort of frying operation going on, if there's a fire there. Now, what I'm saying is that based on the type of fire, this is what we're trying to tell you, based on the type of fire, they would need a type of extinguisher. So the slide before, when you saw water extinguisher. Let's go back and I'll show you, right? Water extinguishers are good on a class E fire. A fire involving paper, wood, plastic, but not plastic, sorry. Plastic shouldn't be in that at all, right? Plastic shouldn't, be burnt at all. But fires involving solids then, right? So the paper, the cardboard, right? That's a water extinguisher. Fires involving like if you have, like kerosene around, diesel around, what you probably would need is a foam extinguisher. Most companies, I have actually seen this one. I have seen this one. This is the red body cream label. I've seen it. Based on, like a chemical storage shed, I've seen it. So it's not as if I haven't seen it, right? Like around companies, right? It's not too strange. It's not too strange at all, right? So the foam actually works on a class A and class B fire, solids and liquids. They work by sealing the surface of the burning liquid. And of course, what that does, it cuts off like the oxygen supply to the fire itself, right? I'll leave this on the left-hand side here. It is actually another slide in it, but like I said, as I did it there, we can match it up one time, right? Carbon dioxide extinguishers, these have a red body and a black label. They are best on fires involving liquids like kerosene, diesel, and stuff. But it's safe to use on most types of fires. It's safe to use, on electricity. It's not, of course, advised in confined spaces and stuff that may already have less oxygen that may give rise to difficulty in breathing, which is asphyxiation. There's a way to tell a CO2 extinguishers. If you look at this one, a CO2 extinguisher stands out. And I don't know if you want to tell me what would make it stand out compared to these here.
The
If you look at
nozzle,
these, right, the nozzle, right? So the
the
nozzle,
nozzle.
yeah. So like the reason for that is the CO2 coming out of that is very cold, minus two something, I tell you, degrees, right? And so degrees Celsius is very cold. You could actually use a CO2 extinguisher to if you throw water on the ground, which I mean you shouldn't do, you could actually use the CO2 extinguisher to turn that into ice. You
So it
could
have a wide nozzle so the gas could come out in a widespread way.
Yeah, and also that you wouldn't burn your hands because if you're just holding the hose like the other extinguisher, remember the CO2 is
Yeah,
very cold, it's gonna burn your hand, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen workers which you're not supposed to be doing, but if by chance your company allows you to, I've seen workers use the CO2 extinguisher to almost instantly cool a cooler of drinks, whatever you drink, right? So I've seen it turn to ice on the ground, right? But again, this is not something you should be playing around with unless you have as a manager. Then as back when I was in Massey, Like we would actually dispose of some of them. Like after 10 years, if the company cheated not extinguishers, but then what do you do with these old ones? So, you kind of have a time to experiment with it. But as a worker, please don't, because if you use the extinguisher for these other reasons I've mentioned here, it may result in you getting fired, right? In fact, once you use an extinguisher, for those of us who know, once you use it, you'll have to answer for using it, right? Just letting you know, once, even if you are the fire watch, right? Once you use it, they will ask you to answer to why you use it, and you better have a good reason, right? And of course, if you have a good reason, very good. If the reason is not so good, because remember, there's a cost involved now. Once you use it, they have to send it for servicing, right? And so nothing is wrong with using it, just letting you know. But folks, in my experience, I'm letting you know too. Remember, I have come through the ranks now. For those who know me, I just didn't drop in the chair here, right? I've trained workers, right? And one of the things I've seen over the years is you see new firewatch and new people who have this role, they tend to be trigger happy, right? You all don't be too trigger happy now, right? Maybe, you know, nothing is wrong. I mean, with going for the extinguisher, but just make sure that it is a fire that really needs an extinguisher. Perhaps you could have done something else to probably just get that fire out, right? Because some companies, I'm not saying me, right? But I know once you use it, you're going to have to answer for it, right? You have to answer to why it is you felt that the extinguisher had to be used. And of course, if it is really a fire, something is out of control, fine, the company will, commend you and praise you and whatever have you for saving the day. But just make sure. I've seen there's one worker at Massey, I've seen him running for the extinguisher twice. And by the second time, we had to tell him no, because this thing could have been extinguished another way. You just had to kind of take out whatever it was, like the fuel source now, right? If it was just paper, whatever, you could just kind of sort of interrupt that a bit, right? So just use common sense to that. Not everything deserves, this full blast of the extinguisher, right? And so as a fire warden, though, if that is what you have, just make sure that like some fires, the welders will know. They like the wires will, sorry, the welders will know. If it's a welder I'm talking about, that they could control this, right? Like something kind of just fell on the side there, whatever, right? They would know, you just have to kind of rule it around a bit, and it will sort of extinguish, right? And so if every time that happens, because welding operation have, times when certain metals will fall to the ground or whatever, just be careful that not every time you run in there to waste out the extinguisher, because they'll fire you. They'll fire you for wasting company equipment, right? So just be careful with it. um, don't be too trigger happy. Just make sure you know what you're doing. If a fire is about 2 to 3 feet high, then okay, fine. The welder may have indicated the person's may. I mean, from you being there, you'll kind of get the idea, okay, like, okay, everybody is kind of in a state of panic. So fine, you can just get into operation then, right? That is a split second decision. I can't give you all the scenarios where it may happen, because it's different scenarios. You would know, you must have common sense to know when to use an extinguisher and when not to use it. But the point is, I'm telling you, when you use it, you're gonna have to answer for using it, because the company have to now pay for it. And as we all know, as we all know, companies do like to spend money, right? So once you use it, you'll have your answer for using it. All right, powder extinguishers. I saw this in a lot of catalyst companies here in Trinidad and Tobago, SEAX and whatever. Have you seen this around powder extinguishers? Red body, blue label, best on class B fires or fires involving liquids. It works by chemically interfering with the combustion process. So this is the one I was telling you. This is what you don't see. Like if you go to, like a barbecue shack, um, some sort of grill place, whatever, you probably will see they have a regular extinguisher, but what they should really have is a wet chemical extinguisher, one that's catered for an oil fire then. So you could actually recommend this. Again, just do these things with a grain of salt. I've realized, as you have realized, people don't like to take correction, especially companies, right? So I always say, as big as I am at, even if I have to recommend something, I normally say, can you consider, right? I do it, but you don't do it in a way that comes off rude now. Can you consider us looking at getting a chemical extinguisher instead of I just saying water extinguisher for an oil fire? The person, of course, you know what you're saying is totally correct. first response you'll get is we don't have money for that. But you need to show them, right? You need to show them. And like I said, those are the things that kind of put my students a cut above the rest, right? I know I've told stories of people who save people life in safety here. They were hired. I know of one that somebody who did that, saved somebody in a company, and that person was actually rewarded with money, right? I won't give you the story, but I'll give you the company. The company was Atlantic LNG. They rewarded the person with money, thousands of dollars, if you heard that story, right? Anyway, you run through your notes, right? Those of us who may be doing this for a job or getting into those positions anyway. Lots of companies are taking on people right now, from what I know in terms of shutdown, right? February, March, anyway. Here, I don't know if these things have started as yet, but you could start off as these positions, and even those of us in Raghunath Singh, and then you could still save a life then, or assist in saving a life. Now, how many of us have one of these at home? That's a question to ask. They're not very expensive. You should invest in them. I have about three, right? I didn't buy all three one time, just to tell you, right? So it's a good habit to be, and I'm talking to you, right? I'm not talking to me, but it's a good habit to practice what you preach now, right? So you can't be a safety out there talking about, fire, and you come home and it's the worst of conditions, there's nothing home, for you to combat a fire anyway, right? So if you could, for your sake, I know many of you wouldn't do it, right? I know many of you wouldn't do it, but for your sake, how many times have we heard then of fires? How many times have we heard of things like that? And an extinguisher, you could actually get one for $300-400. Now you may say, well, $300-400, but folks, when you go to the mall, you spend more than that. How about putting just one away, right? I'm actually thinking about getting another one, to be honest with you, right? Because I have I have some plans, right? Let's just put it like that, right? But yeah, like $300-400, you spend more than that, right? You spend more than that. So what's the price of your safety then? What's the price of knowing that if there is a fire, right? That is a means to extinguish the fire. Now, just in case you're here and you're not going to do that, maybe I can give you some household remedies, right? But I'll just give you two. So of course, water, but don't use water on an oil fire. You can use powder.
Flour.
I'm not, yeah, I'm not talking about face powder. For the ladies, you might want to give away a nice face powder, right? And for the men too, but you could use flour. Yes, very good shade. I have used it a long time ago, right? I used it a long time ago. A long time ago, I was renting somewhere, and one of the electrical sockets started to spark and caught a fire, and it had a ceiling. And it didn't have it. I was renting. It didn't have an extinguisher. And I just went to the quickest thing, which was flour, and just one handful of flour did it. That's the thing about powder. Like powders interfere with the fire process then, right? The heat, oxygen, fuel. One did it. I probably put another handful of powder up there, toss it up there just for good measure, but one handful did it, right? Baking powder, very good, right? Don't rely on these things. I mean, you shouldn't rely on household remedies when you could get these things purchased at Price Mart and whatever have you, right? Limitations of extinguishers, they are not good on every kind of fire. That's what we said. A water extinguisher is not good on an oil fire. Oh, by the way, sorry. I actually didn't mean to leave out this slide. This is a very powerful slide, right? So there is something called a fire blanket. For those who are doing this course to become a fire watch or a fire warden, this is also one of your friends. A fire blanket, they'll give you one of that, right? If you're in the office, you may purchase it, but not a lot of offices I know have fire blankets, right? And if they have it, it's kind of tucked away somewhere, right? Some stock room somewhere, right? But fire blankets, they are good, but anybody could tell me what could be wrong with the whole operation of using it by looking at this picture. I'll say that again. Fire blankets are good, but what could be wrong with this picture here? What I try not to give out the answer because the answer is yeah. What could
So,
be wrong with somebody having to use it?
Sí, qué opinión.
Right. You're putting yourself at risk. right? Now, you ever wonder, for those of us who are doing this for the companies, right? For those of us who don't know, right? Do you know that the Firewatch are paid almost the same rate as a safety with your NEBOSH? And this is just like a 1 day course, but the NEBOSH is a 5 month, 18-month course if you're doing the degree, whatever. But why? Why are Firewatch paid good? Why are they paid so good? But the answer is you're putting yourself at risk, right? What was happening here? So you can imagine, folks, you can imagine the people who get this position. If you're being paid, those of us in the companies, Raghunath Singh, I don't think they're paying you to be a Firewatch, right? That's just something that you do for the company now, right? And those of us who are in the companies and you're just doing the fire warden training because, it's part of the requirements or whatever, right? You have to ask yourself, in the event of a fire, would you put your body on the line? Would you put your life on the line, right? That's a personal question because I have done it back and forth, meaning there were times in my life I didn't do it, and there are times that I did it, right? Like before I had kids, I would be happy to out a fire that's 7 feet high. Now, I probably wouldn't do that, especially if you have small kids, right? My kids kind of big now, right? But if you have like small kids, I'm out. I am out of that building. Let somebody else go in, right? So, so as a fire, what you put in your life on the line, just remember that. And for those of us who are doing this, I'm going to talk to you all on those of us who are doing this for the companies to get that position. Do you know in the event of a fire, when everybody's going out, you have to stay there, right? I know of shutdown work where, a fire would have started. The, the fire services is on the way. The fire watch and them trying to leave. And the supervisor in charge tell them, no, you'll have to go back inside there and try to get that fire under control. So the fire watch position is a high risk position, right? That's why it's almost paid. It's a short course, but it's almost paid well, sometimes as well as the full-fledged safety position. You are putting your life on the line. In fact, the safety could leave. The safety could leave, but as a fire watch, you are to do your best to sort of extinguish that fire anyway, right? So the fire blanket, back to the story, you have to be close to the fire to use it. If you notice what's happening here. And what I've seen though, if you have seen others, you can let me know. I could only share from my experience. I've seen some defective blankets, meaning the company didn't purchase new blankets now. So like the current blanket have a hole in it, or it have ripped threads in it, right? So where it have ripped threads, I actually saw one, folks, I'm telling you, no offense to them, if anybody, I mean, because I worked there, that's my experience in Massey. I saw one that had patches on it, like they put, what's the thing? What's the thing for the roof? They think there's patch of roof with?
Um,
Duct, no, it's not duct tape. What is patch
Flash
roofs?
ban.
Flash band. You imagine I was telling her they put flash band on a fire blanket, and you hear it? Did you hear the company I call? The company with money, Massey, right? Put flash band on the fire blankets and now, right? So you all be careful. I mean, I don't expect this for the office workers who are here, but when you go there, folks, if you're a fire watch and they give you anything like that, protect yourself now. And I tell you, when you stand up for yourself too, the first thing they will ask is where this person come from, right? I had companies that call me and tell me that, and they say this person, they ask the person which school they learned from, right? One of those persons today is a manager in Massey, right? The way she presented herself, right? They ask, where did you learn? And they call me just to verify, right? So they give you, don't just hold it in your hand and you're laughing and you're studying the money, right? Open the fire blanket, watch it, kind of probably try to get the size of it, and see if it have any defects, any loose threads in it. One of the things that a fire blanket too is made out of asbestos materials. If it have loose threads in it, not that one exposure could give you cancer, but asbestos has been linked to cancer, right? So it shouldn't have any defects. It shouldn't see any threads. It shouldn't see any tear. And imagine what I said about the flash ban in it anyway, right? Any one of you have worked as a fire? I know some of you all did. Melissa, I don't know if Melissa or Sumatra, have you all worked as a fire watch before? I think you all may have, you know. So maybe you can share your experience if you wanna share if you have access to your mic. If not, you could let me know when you could share and I'll kind of turn over the platform to you all so that the people who are here then would understand that this is a good position, but it's also one in which you put in your life at risk, right? Of course, like I said, you may just want to disappear that supervisor if you have kids and get out. But then, you know, I mean that may be the smart thing to do. I'm just telling you, right? Instead of going back there and remember you're not a firefighter, right? I mean, you're not the like you're not the fire service, but at the same time, that's why they hire you then, you know, to kind of, get the fire out in the incipient stages anyway, right? So limitations of the fire extinguishers, they need to be close to the fire to use the extinguisher. Sighting of extinguishers, I'll run through some of this to you. So they need to be sighted near to the line of the escape route. Let me read all, right? Sighted near but not near to the danger points. Need to be next to the room exits, inside or outside, depending on the risk to occupancies. It needs to be on the same position on each floor for multi-story buildings. Fire extinguisher should be no more than 30 meters away from the people who are likely to use them. They need to be away from excess heat or cold, and they should be positioned above the ground, about 1 meter above the ground. I feel I'll move on, right? I don't want to overdo every slide. Um, but and I seen it's 7 o'clock. So just two quick ones here, right? So like the position of a fire extinguisher in a room should be on the way out, right? So if you look at your room, or whatever room that you're in or whatever warehouse you're in, look to see where is the way out, right? How do you get out, right? And if the way out is that side, sorry, that side, right? If the way out is that side, then the extinguisher need to be sighted there. You shouldn't be then that on the way out, you're looking for the extinguisher, and the extinguisher is way on the other side of the warehouse, right? So you can read this out. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. The requirement from OSHA and from one of the laws in the UK, known as the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Orders, recommend that these things be suspended above ground level, and they need to be a sign saying, fire extinguisher. They also need to be a sign indicating how to use it, which is using the pass, pull, aim, squeeze, sweep technique, right? There are some exceptions. I don't know if I'm going to go into all of that, but there are some exceptions. If you have to rest it on the floor, you may wonder, well, why would we rest it on the floor? Well, remember, if it's a fire watch, you don't have a wall around you, if you're in an open warehouse. If you have to rest it on the floor, they recommend you resting it on a red block. Please remember that. Most companies don't know that, right? They rest it on a red block. And then in some buildings are made out of glass, mightn't have too much. I mean, it have in Port of Spain and it have in San Fernando and it have around, I guess, the area. If your company, like some people don't like things on their glass, then because the glass will kind of get, like a bit of a impression on it. The company doesn't want to keep suspended this thing on a glass building. They could rest it on the ground, but it has to be on a red block, right? You could actually get a piece of wood, whatever, and you can paint it red. That is the exception to suspending it, right? Fire extinguishers must be inspected. Now you could check it, right? So you could check the extinguisher. There is a gauge on it to see if it is charged, recharge, or needs to be charged again or overcharged, right? There's a gauge there. There's a gauge that's got a needle and a pointer. There's a needle, right? And it's going to go between charge. If you see it say under pressure, well, then it needs to charge. But if you see overpressure sometimes happen when they fill in it, right? They may fill it a little bit more. Overpressure is actually not a bad thing. Overpressure doesn't mean anything is wrong with the cylinder. Overpressure is not too bad. Overpressure just means it have, like when they were filling it, maybe they sort of didn't cut it off in time, but a fire extinguisher that is overpressure will still work. If it's under charge, if it says recharge, well, then that wouldn't work. That would come as if you are trying to squeeze insecticide can, but the can is empty, nothing would happen, right? So you could check the gauge. There are some other things you want to check for. If you're listening, you could try to write them down quickly. You want to check to see like the hose is not dry rotten. Remember, you as a firewatch, you don't know how long the company had this for, right? So when they give it, make sure the hose not dry rot. Make sure that the canister has no signs of corrosion. Those are some things they could look for in it anyway, right? Other than that, by the way, the powder extinguishers, like the one with the blue label, if they give you, if you see it marked powder, what you should do is you should shake it up a bit, right? Well, not when I say shake it up, what they do, they normally turn it upside down and then turn it back around and turn it upside down and turn it back around, right? Because what could happen with powder? What happens with powder? If you have uh,
Then they
milk
get
at home,
hard and solid.
yeah, it will kind of get hard. It will get like a cake, right? So monthly, I mean, if you're in that company long enough, if it's just a, like a shutdown job, fine. But for those of us in the companies, monthly, if it's a powder one you have, there's no need to turn over the water one, there's no need to turn over the CO2. But if it's a powder, kind of need to shake it a bit, turn it up and down a bit to kind of make sure that the powder doesn't cake up inside of it, right? Other than that, you can send your extinguisher for testing and refilling. There'll be a time period in it. You could dictate the time period, but you should probably send it probably once every 6 months, right? If you send it to like these companies like Regional Fire and Safety, I send mines there, or you send yours to Safety Plus or CSP. Um, if the extinguisher that you have sent back to them has been 10 years, you have just been every 6 months, you have been servicing this every 6 months. If it's been 10 years, right? For most, well, for CO2 extinguishers or 5 years for regular extinguishers, what they will do, they will discharge it. They will empty it out then, right? And the purpose of doing that is to actually make sure that the mechanism of discharge is still working. If it's 5 years, like I've been in the office, I've about three that I rotate in the office, right? But I've been in the office, Duncan Village, probably good in 15 years, right? So like I know there are some days like when I send it, but like when the bill come back is a bit more. When you read it, they say, okay, like what they did a test by discharge. They will discharge your good extinguisher. Now, sometimes what I do if I see the 5 years coming up and I know I'm going to send it for servicing, I would discharge it for myself. I would use it in a firewatch training. Sometimes I kind of show my son it or whatever have you. So I use it now because I know they're going to discharge it anyway. So I might as well show them home how to use it in the event of a fire. That's a good thing you can probably do, right? Every 5 years for the powder extinguisher, every 10 years for the CO2 extinguishers, right? If you buy one, as I tell you, if you buy one home and you never use it, thank God you never use it, right? You never had a fire home, but you can show your family members how to use it. Maybe use it on a outdoor barbecue fire, whatever have you, right? So at least people could know how to use it, right? So if an employee is expected to use a fire extinguisher, then that person must be competent. And we mentioned the law there from the UK. Means of escape. So as a fire warden, firewatch, you should probably think about how you're going to escape in the event of a fire. You should have more than one ways of getting out, right? So overall escape should lead people from an unprotected area to a protected area. And you need a fire escape plan. Then in the event of an escape, you don't need to end up to the back of the building, right? You need to end up to the front of the building where you could actually escape, right? Remember, I do consulting. We see this sometimes. It was when I was doing last year. They actually got through, they were doing store audits. I wouldn't call it company name, but when they walked me through the fire escape route, I ended up by a wall, a blocked wall. And I was like, this can't be the fire escape. We had it changes. We had it changes. We ended up putting it to the other side of the building now because that side of the building didn't have a wall. You could have accessed a roadway from there anyway, right? Requirements for means of escape. You need to have sufficient means of escape, so maybe more than one way to get out. Um, the roads should be protected by the effects of fire, meaning you probably should have fire extinguishers along there. You should have emergency lighting in the event of power outage. Again, folks, just remember in one past experience where in a plant, current, power went. this could happen. The generators didn't kick in, and the place was pitch black. You couldn't even
It didn't
see
have any
maybe like,
emergency light.
no, it didn't, right? This was some years ago, right? And as I won't tell you the company either, right? So at this where I was at, I couldn't see anything in front of me. I just had to stay right there because I couldn't see. There was the place was so dark where that part of wherever had like, like it was kind of isolated with walls and whatever, but you couldn't see anything in front of you, right? So the idea though is that this was years ago that now you should have emergency lighting. The emergency lighting, should be positioned
At every
along,
entrance and exit.
along the escape route, and it should show the direction of escape. You should have today, of course, illuminated signs that have exit in the event of a, like a power outage like that. That the sign itself is illuminated and you're not relying on a light source. The sign itself would say exit, right? So I skip through here fire doors. If you know what that is, if you don't know what it is, it's not a slang. There is actually something called a fire door, right? Um, Bhagwan Singh does sell it, right? So normally the door going onto the fire exit should be a fire door. The long and short is that what is a fire door? If you watch it, a fire door has been treated to suppress fire spread. So if there is a fire and that's the escape route, the fire door then supposed to give you some extra time. How much time? Is about 30 minutes extra, right? And you don't really need 30 minutes to escape. You need about 3 minutes to escape. But the fire door could actually prevent the fire from spreading. The fire door has been treated with some sort of, like fire retardant paint. Um, Sometimes it's like a paste, right? And it will give you a bit longer lasting time. This is the fire doesn't spread to the other rooms, etc. Some of the doors you see it in one of the slides, they have a strip at the top of it and they have a strip at the bottom of it. You would notice your doors, for the door to open, it have a space. But then that space could be where the fire spreads. But most fire doors have an intumescent strip. They have a strip at the base of the door and a strip to the top and a strip on the side. And what that does, it swells up in the event of a fire and it seals the door so that no flame, no heat, whatever, could get to the other room. They use that a lot in offshore platforms, mightn't be too much in like in a warehouse because it might not have a space for a door. But in an offshore platform where you don't have any way to go, the fire will have to be contained within the area that it is in, then called a fire compartment, right? So fire door should open in the direction of escape, should not be wedge open, should be no resistance to opening, should lead to a place of safety. It needs to be wide enough to allow everybody to get it. We mentioned the lighting must be available at all times to guide the evacuees, the function of emergency lighting to indicate the escape route, to provide constant illumination to a place of safety. You also need to do checks on them. A monthly check could be that there's also a call point on an emergency light. You could actually press that and you'll see if they are lighted. Now, what that does not do, it doesn't, like if you take off your finger, well then it will stop lighting, right? So what they do, you could simulate power failure. You may wonder why. Why would I want to simulate power failure, right? Now, for those who know emergency lighting, sometimes, I don't know if you have been around any of them, sometimes when the power goes, they don't stay on lighting for long. They have a defect in them, right? So you don't want, like during an escape exercise or a real incident, yes, they came on, but then in about a minute time, they came back off, right? So what you can do, you can simulate power failure. How you can do that? You can probably trip, your main breaker in a building or a part of a building, or you could just unplug them, right? You could just unplug them. An emergency light is plugged on all the time, and it only comes on because it's being charged, right? It's converting the AC current to DC current, and there's a battery component inside here. So to simulate power failure, you can just unplug it and see if it comes on, and then see how long it will stay on for, right? I would recommend what they have here, about an hour. Um, Nobody should take so long to escape. I told you before, how long should it take you to escape a building? 3 minutes, right? But an hour is a good, I mean, like you don't have to sit down and watch it all the time. You can just unplug it, go about your business, and in an hour time come back and see if it is still light. And if it is, fine. But some of them, they have defects from the manufacturer, right? So you pressing the call point to make sure it working is one thing, but then would it really stay on for 5 minutes? Would it stay on for 3 minutes? Would it stay on for 2 minutes? Or would it just come on and come back off in the event of an emergency, right? Please learn the skills, learn the skills, learn the skills, right? So overall, you need a procedure. So this one here, if you have anybody that's differently able in your company, please consider them, right? Disabilities happen at all times. Um, you don't have to be born that way. Of course, there are people that are differently abled, but sometimes you could be having a bad pain, a bad back, a hiking exercise, a football game, and you damage your foot. So on that day now, you are on the third floor. The company should have realized, okay, when you come in that you are limping. I've done that again. I've done that. I've done that. There was a lady that nobody liked in a company. I won't call the company name, right? Everybody used to tell her, go and jump in a lake. Like that kind of slang now. And she really went and jumped and she damaged her foot, right? But for that 3 months, she was in crutches then, right? We had to put her downstairs, make room for her, right? You put her down at ground level then because you don't want something to happen. And when the person on crutches anyway, right? This wasn't an elevator company. They didn't have any elevators, right? They had stairs. So had to put her at ground level, had to make sure that I made sure she was like where you could have easily accessed at least two exit routes anyway, right? So you kind of cater for the needs of people. If the person has a friend, you can set up what is called a buddy system. A buddy system is dependent on your goodwill if you are the buddy, right? Because a buddy system means that in the event of a disaster, emergency, that you're gonna go for your friend, right? That type of emergency plan, if you cater to a person, is called a PEEP, a personal emergency evacuation plan. And of course, you need one for the general workers as well, called a general emergency evacuation plan, right? So cater for somebody who may have different types of impairments, sensory impairments, or hearing impairments, right? You need to cater for those things anyway. People's behavior in a fire, we have found that people behave differently in a drill to if it is a real exercise, right? So drills kind of help reduce doubt and panic, but seasoned people, when I say okay, so let me take that back. People who have gone through training but not experienced could still behave irrational. People who have gone through training but have not had the experience of a chemical release or a fire or somebody with a gun on your compound. This is Trinidad and Tobago, right? Sometimes the people who are trained then to assist them, like if we say like the fire wardens here, right? Then they're the ones who can panic. And if they panic, then what is left for the rest of us, right? So one of the points here is that however, competent persons can still behave irrational as behaviors during, I would say, fires or a disaster is complicated. And it is complicated unless you have the experience in handling it, right? No drill could prepare you for a real fire. No drill could prepare you for a real bomb on your compound. No drill could prepare you for somebody with a gun on your compound or a stabbing on your compound, right? All right. Fire instruction notices should be clear, placed next to the fire alarm activating point, should state the fire action to take on hearing the alarm, should encourage persons not to tackle the fire unless they are trained in the uses and limitations of fire extinguishers. In the case of a fire, raise the alarm, call for assistance, give your name, etc. If you are trained, use the correct extinguisher. Do not take personal risk. It is your responsibility to find out where they are. Once an alarm has been sounded, if you have no part to play, you get yourself down to the muster point. You get your name called. That's called the roll call method. Of course, the disadvantage is that the rules should be updated, right? If I came in as a consultant or somebody came in today and their name was not on that person may get lost there and that person might not know where to go. Of course, the rules in the company is wherever that person is, someone should carry them down to the master point in the event of a drill. Those things are always complicated, especially when you deal with customers, right? If you have a customer-oriented company and five customers by the counter and the alarm goes off, even if it is a drill, it's the responsibility of the CSR, whatever, whoever you want to call them, right? Whoever is dealing with them to take them down to the muster point. But at that point in time, their name will not be on the roll, right? The fire marshal system, which is where the fire marshals come in or the fire wardens come in, is where if an alarm is sounded, the person will go towards the like that group of people, right, and help them to get out, right? So this is also where the fire marshals put themselves at risk, that they are not going out, but they are going in. They are going in. They're going to make a sweep, of the office, of the kitchen, of the welfare area, maybe the washrooms, knock the door, see if anybody is inside there and try to get them out, right? So the fire marshal system, quicker, more efficient way of evacuation, problems identified during the evacuation rather after it. It helps to reduce crowd panic. If you see your fire marshal coming in, which would be you, if somebody sees you and they say, okay, they say, Matthew, what's going on? And Matthew says, it's just a drill. Shadrach just doing a drill, right? So then there's a sense of calmness then, right? But if, again, the alarm has been sounded and then, they say, let's just say Matthew again. So we say, Matthew, right? What's going on? And Matthew says, there was somebody with a gun downstairs. This actually happened on tele, right? So, but then by the fire marshal being in the fire marshal could say, okay, the person is in the main block building, the person not here. So it does help to reduce doubt and panic, right? So they said that we have called in the police, right? And whatever have you. So there's some measure of panic, crowd control then. Of course, if it is a gas release and stuff, still you can say, look, I think one of the reactors have overflowed, but the process operators are doing their best, but we still need to get out, right? So like the fire marshals do assist with that process. However, disadvantage is that they could have had a day off, wherever is your fire warden or fire marshal. What happens if you take a day off, which you're entitled to, right? It's reliant really for those of us who are the fire wardens, those of us who are not doing this for a job. It's just part of your job, like the company people who are here, right? It's actually reliant on your goodwill because I don't think they're paying you for that, right? The fire warden positions is not a paid position. That's something that you have somebody kind of nominated to do that, right? But in the event of some sort of upset condition and you going in now, putting yourself on like at risk, it's kind of based on your goodwill and attitude, right? I mean, you don't have to. I'm just telling you, nobody in this life should judge anybody, right? Everybody know what their priorities are, right? I remember in BP. I remember in BP, right? The guy retired now, right? He retired now. He retired years now. He retired years. I remember in BP. The year, I can tell you the year. The year was probably 2006. Some of y'all probably may have not been born as yet. I'm not sure, right? The year was 2006. There was an earthquake in Trinidad, 2006. I remember where I was at, right? And I remember when I was BP, right? So, but I remember looking for the safety man. I wouldn't call his name. He was a famous guy, right? Um, Nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. And he had to give the all clear. He had to say go home or not go home, right? But nowhere to be found, right? You know where he was? Anybody could guess where he was? Where he was? Make a guess.
By the bar.
Nah. Is that earthquake? Is that earthquake? He wouldn't be by the bar.
He left.
Yeah, but where did he go? This is Mayaro, by the way. Make a guess where he went. It's a
On the
good, he went
beach?
to,
Going
no,
by the
it's an
beach.
earthquake, folks. It's an earthquake. He wouldn't go on the beach. They have tsunami and thing. This is 2006. Come on. 2005 was the tsunami. The big tsunami in Indonesia was 2000. You want to know? He went for his kids in school. He didn't tell anybody that. Like the first time of the earthquake, he just left. Right? So that's a saying that it's reliant on your goodwill, right? And like I said, I mean, at the point in time, oh, that's years ago now, right? He went for his kids, right? So I don't get it wrong. As I say, you can't judge anybody, right? But you know, maybe he should have given some sort of command or something. But the first thought he had was to his kids and he went for his kids, right? I suppose it was more. This was again, folks, so much as I tell you that was again, right? I can't even go back
What
that
become
far.
of him? You fired him?
No, he wasn't fired, but no, he wasn't fired, He wasn't fired, right? I know he stayed there a bit, but I mean, that's some years ago. I know he's retired. I don't know if he's still alive. After the class, I could message me the person name or I could tell you the person name, right? But I wouldn't quote it on here. But he was a bit, he was a slim guy. He was like fit, but he was a bit old, right? I mean, you could tell he was old. He wasn't a young person then, right? So, if that was 20 years ago, I know I definitely sure that he would have been retired anyway, right? But like I said, folks, that's how it is. Nobody judging anybody. I wouldn't judge a man for that, right? I wasn't the owner of the company, of course, and it's people who paying he, so everything should be good with he, right? All right, folks, we would switch into the other one there. Let me see. I think we're making good time. The other one is shorter than this one. Oh my Lord. Is that the time?
Yeah, the one has 40 slides,
No, but we did the classes of fires and thing already, right? And I could break it down for you all. The other one is just a risk assessment, right? Okay, we go in, right? So the objective of this session, the fire triangle, as you have heard me mention, you need three things to start a fire: heat, oxygen, and fuel. All of these must be in the right concentration for you to have a fire, right? If you take off one of these, you would not have a fire. Therefore, when you use a water extinguisher, the water extinguisher cools down the heat, so you wouldn't have a fire. A CO2 extinguisher removes the oxygen, so you wouldn't have a fire. And by good housekeeping, you could cut down your fuel sources, right? We mentioned the classes of fires before: A, B, C, D, and F, so I don't need to explain it. The electrical fire is actually called electrical fire. A fire could be spread by direct burning, for example, two boxes, or this pallet in contact with another pallet. That's called direct burning. Fires could also be spread via conduction, which is between solids, convection through the air, right? Through the air carries the smoke upstairs, or through radiation, which is over long distances. So even, I mean, this is just a scenario, folks. I don't think this is really reality. I would want to say the fire had to be large enough here for the heat now to ignite this paper in the basket here. If you notice, the door is not on fire. It just theories an idea of what radiation is, and heat can be transferred over long distances via radiation, right? Common causes of a fire: arson, use of flammable liquids and gases, welding, smoking, storage of flammables and oxidizers, overheating, static electricity, vehicles behaving like an ignition source, poor housekeeping, ignition of explosive atmosphere. So I'll explain this for you. There are some places like some companies, Atlantic LNG in Trinidad here, Proman, where you have gases are in the air. Those types of environments are classed as explosive atmospheres, right? And an explosive atmosphere is one that is explosive, oxidizing, extremely flammable, highly flammable. They could occur in the form of dust or even in the form of gases, right? Consequences of a fire: pollution, everything bad: human harm, structural damage to building, financial loss, poor public relation, low moral. And the rest of it I was telling you is how to do a fire risk assessment. It's very simple. So how to do a fire risk assessment, for those who know, it's the same 5 steps. You identify the fire hazards, like what in your company could cause a fire: somebody smoking, a barrel of chemical, right? Cardboard, paper left lying around. You determine, so you can check all of that out. You can do active observation to figure out, how could we identify fire hazards. Then you decide who could be harmed. Anybody could be harmed in your company: cleaners, contractors, trespassers, anybody, because it's a fire, right? The next thing you do, you evaluate the risk. There are a couple ways of evaluating the risk. For those who know, we could use words by saying high, medium, or low. That is called a qualitative risk assessment, or you could use numbers from 1 to 5. If you use numbers 1 to 5, that's called a semi-quantitative system. Once you do a risk assessment and the risk turns out to be high, you have to control it. You can try to follow something called the hierarchy of control, where you try to eliminate the source of fire. You can try to substitute or replace the process. You can try to isolate. As you come down the line, though, you're going to come down with things like PPE and administrative control. There is no exam for this course, so there's no need to kind of know it. But the idea here is that you try the controls from the top, you try to solve the problem at the source, and then you try to work your way down to the other controls anyway. Let me just clean this slide a bit there, right? So we go in again. The next thing in the risk assessment for those who know, well, you come up with an action plan for improvement, like how to reduce the risk. You record and then you review your risk assessment probably every year. What's the record? The record is a sheet that you do it on, right? A risk assessment is like those of us who did this before, it's like a table, it's like a tabular format. When you fill it out, what are the hazards, who can be harmed, what is the risk, what's the controls, that itself becomes the record, right? And then you review that ever so often. If a year passes, you need to review. If there is a fire, you need to review. If an auditor tell you something that something is not up to standard, you can review it, right? The Health and Safety Executive website, as some of you all know, if you don't know, there's a HSE website. I'll just show you on the phone, right? Because to go and look for it on the live will be a bit tedious, right? So if you're into safety here, there is a website that is meant for us. It's called the Health and Safety Executive website. I'm trying to talk to you and I type out HE instead of HSE, right? I'll show you it on the phone here. And so the Health and Safety Executive website, they have free materials. They have free books. We call them guidances. And anybody could download like a guidance on how to prevent fire in, a restaurant, a hotel, an education establishment, wherever your company is at, you could actually find out, you know, um, the Health and Safety Executive website, free materials. Like it didn't load properly, right? It didn't load properly. I'm not too sure why not. I'm not gonna load it properly because you could still see the tag Health and Safety Executive website. It's a free website. They have lots of books, whatever you want to find. There is like a search bar. You want to find something on fire control or water extinguishers. You can just plug it into the search bar, press enter, and you get them. The status of them is that they are just there to give you advice. They are free, right? There's another book called ACOPS. Those of us who did NEBOSH before, you know that. So there are these books published by the HSE. They are free on anything that you want to get anyway. So I have some here, how they work, right? And that's the idea with them, right? So fire prevention and prevention of fire spread. This is the last one. So can eliminate the risk of a flammable atmosphere by substituting. So this is like the hierarchy of control. Substitute something, like something more flammable for something less flammable. Maybe you are using diesel to clean the tools. A lot of companies do that at the end of the day. But perhaps you could probably change that out, maybe to kerosene, or maybe you could just use purple blaster or something like that, right? So if you have any fuel sources, you need to have it well secured, maybe a security guard. Competent person allowed should be only allowed to handle and use flammable substances, right? Um, if anybody is doing these kinds of work, hot work, you need to have a permit to work. You need to be competent. And of course, to get any hot work permit, part of the permit would require having like a safety measure in place, which is why we have like firewoods and firewatch, right? We cannot underscore the purpose of good housekeeping because good housekeeping is going to knock off the additional fuel sources, right? If you have a lot of paper, cardboard, and stuff, you kind of want to get rid of that. If you have a lot of chemicals around your company, what you want to do is kind of keep, like the chemicals away from the main warehouse, store them outdoors, they say, have proper security for them, store them in a secure area, maybe have some detector systems, spill kits around. But you need to keep your quantities down to a minimum, right? So you see here, avoid storing incompatible substances. And incompatible substances are substances that would actually, it's kind of like an oxidizer and a flammable. Like you're storing Clorox next to kerosene. That's an oxidizer with a flammable. Now, why that is bad? Because the oxidizer is a source of oxygen. The flammable is a source of fuel anyway, right? So have proper ventilation, have proper lighting. You can have these storage cabinets if you want to, right? And of course, you should consider the heat release properties of material, this smoke, and gas release properties. This depends on what you're dealing with. If it's, like concrete or board or styrofoam, which you probably shouldn't want to talk about here, right? And we did mention in the offshore platforms, they use a fire compartment. A fire compartment is like an area where it has been catered to keep the fire inside, right? Compartment should withstand the fire for a minimum of 30 minutes. In other words, they have fire doors, the walls have been treated, there's a sprinkler system. So if the fire is in a unit, they wouldn't allow it to spread then, right? They have fire suppressant systems. So very important in the offshore industry where they can limit it and deal with it throughout, a platform. In a warehouse, an open warehouse, it may be impossible because you're exposed to the atmosphere. In a company, it may be possible, like a room, it may still be possible to put a fire door, have an extinguisher in the room. So in a way, that may act as a fire compartment. It's a room anyway, but if there's a fire, the fire could be suppressed in that room then. That's the idea of fire compartmentation, right? I mentioned intumescent materials, and intumescent material is like a coating or a strip. To be honest, most intumescent materials are strips, right? The fire doors have them to the top of them. In the event of a fire, these things expand and they seal the door so no smoke, flame, heat could get to another room. Right now, we have 5 minutes again, and this is the last slide. The the ovens you have at home have intumescent materials in it. You ever wonder why? You could bake, a cake, you could bake chicken, you could bake whatever, turkey, ham, whatever, right? For 4 hours minimum. I mean, for Christmas time, whatever, people doing these things way beyond that, right? And your oven does not burn to the ground, right? If you wonder, well, what's amazing about that? Well, here's what like what is amazing with that. At temperatures of 400 to 600 degrees Celsius, a steel beam, right, will be compromised. But in your oven, in your kitchen, the grill in the stove is not a steel beam. But you ever wonder how come this thing not melted? How come these little grills, it's so light, you can take them up. You can take all of them up, in fact, in one hand, right? The grills in your oven, right? How come the oven is taking temperatures of 400, 500, maybe sometimes 600? And I just told you it's a steel beam on a construction site at 600 degrees Celsius would actually sag, right? Steel is compromised at 400. 600, it go on through. You can't use it again. But how come you using your oven all this time, right? The answer is intumescent material. Your oven at home, the inside of it, those little grills, right, are intumescent materials, right? So what we're saying is that that's an example of it. But if it's possible now to get, which it is possible to get a fire door with the intumescent material on it, very good. If it's possible to get some sort of paste, sealant, right? They call it gypsum mud for those in the construction industry. They call it mud, but I think the proper name is gypsum mud, right? Or wall. I think they use it a lot in America. I don't know if I'm saying the correct thing, but like probably saying the wrong thing. But
Compound.
compound, yeah, right? So if you put that, if you got one that is fire resistant. And that's, I mean, this had to be that where the room is, or where this office is, or where this structure is, we have like a furnace there. So then you want the walls of the place to be fireproof, right? So you're calling the contractors, they'll put on the compound, the mud. Of course, a lot of work involving kind of sanding it back down, which is a bit hazardous. But at the end of the day, your walls now are treated to withstand a certain measure of fire. 3 minutes. I told you that I finished, right? I've done this before, remember I told you that, right? And that's why I took the time to do some of this in the other lesson. I did tell you when I reach here, I wouldn't do it over again, right? So, ladies and gents, thanks for being here. I actually, anyway, that's another thing. Thanks for being here, right? Thanks for giving me undivided attention. Paula, Frederick there. I know some of you all I didn't acknowledge because you came in when I was teaching, and since 6:30, I have been going. I actually didn't. I don't know if you felt it, maybe you did. I didn't. I didn't even know it was that late, right? Andy, nice to have you all. Shane, Harry Nanan. Well, Shane, that's you. That's it's a Shane Bash, right?
Yeah,
Samantha,
yeah,
and of
that's me.
course
That's me.
my older students like Rumel and Raleigh and stuff, right? So tomorrow I'll probably try to get your proper spelling of your names. I know you have been sitting for a long time. Those of us who are here since 20 past 6, some of you are here since quarter past 6. So let me bring the session to an end. As I mentioned, once it's converted, I'm going to put it up on YouTube. You'll probably get it access. If you don't know, you could just get us on YouTube, Shadrach Safety Institute, and we'll try to verify your names tomorrow.
Tomorrow we have
Just
class
10.
again?
No, it's just we did it in one day, right? As I mentioned, those who came in a bit late,
Right.
as I have 1 minute again now, next week, Thursday, if anybody's interested, we want to do our confined space. I don't have all the Thursdays free, I told you that. And the other week, I may want to do a first aid, right? First aid training. So I did not get to show you the video, but I think I more or less spoke about it, how to use an extinguisher, pull the pin,
Um,
aim the hose to the base of the fire, squeeze the nozzle. We spoke about different types of ways to not to overpressure that nozzle anyway. Don't press it too hard then, right? And then sweep from side to side. You can just go to YouTube and look at a video, folks. I think in this generation, we are all part of the YouTube university. You can learn a lot from YouTube anyway, right? And you learn a lot from live classes as well. So, folks, any questions you may have?
the
Yes, so one question. You
Sure.
mentioned the fire extinguisher, putting it on a red block. Why?
I think that's well, I suppose it's a way to notice that this is important. I suppose that's the main logic behind it. But it's also part of the law. Like that's what the law said. If you run to back that slide, they were the regulatory reform fire safety orders that said it must be suspended or it must be in a red block. But the law must have a reason, like they must have a reason for saying that. And I would suppose it's to indicate that it is something used for fire. The fire signs itself, if you look at a fire sign, it's like red and white. The one that says, fire
Yeah.
extinguishers is like red and white. So I suppose going with that theme, the law would have mentioned to probably put it in a way that people could identify it as something important then, right? As opposed to leaving it on the ground and resting it on the ground, etc. Right?
Okay.
Anybody else?
Understand.
Okay,
how much
folks.
for the
How much for the?
first aid?
All our short courses are the same
First
price,
aid.
right? 550. All our
Oh,
short
okay.
courses are the same
Cool.
price, right? I don't think we have but that's something we've always done over the years. Unless if it's a company, like some companies, like if it's like a big company, we would say, okay, risk assessment is another price. But for students, we kind of keep all of our short courses the same price, right? Folks, all the best at the event. Thanks again for your time. Do enjoy your dinner, do enjoy your night, and we'll kind of lace tomorrow at the same time, right? All the best, everyone. I would not see you all back next week, but do enjoy the rest of your night. All right? Bye.